We talked about the purpose of a musical instrument to make sound, but now let's get into the different types of musical instruments. So, yes, we want them to make sound, but now, how do we classify musical instruments? So, there are lots of different ways you can look up classifications. I actually checked this out on Wikipedia a bit, classifications. They had ancient systems, so people had all sorts of ways. And one of the ways, we'll even write them out here. Maybe get your ancient systems. There's how you would do in music class, which we'll talk about in a bit. And then there's one I found that actually made a lot of sense to me. So I didn't know the name before. It's called Hornbostel-Sachs. If you know how to say that correctly, and I'm not, forgive me. But I kind of like the way they talked about how to classify instruments. So we'll talk about basically these two, music class classification and this Hornbostel-Sachs. I guess it's convenient that the word horn is in that name. Anyway, let's check this out. Let's talk about how they actually came up with these classifications. So they classify four main types of music. One of them is called an idiophone. Phone, of course, is sound. That's all it means. You use phones. Why? Because they transmit sound. I know what you have right on your phone now gives you video and all that too, but phones classically, a phone is just a sound maker. So idio is Greek for self, so self-sounding. Here are some self-sounding instruments. Here's a steel drum, cymbals, maracas, xylophones of the serious and the baby sort, chimes, bells. What we mean by self-sounding here is you hit the object and it's the object that shakes. The shaking object then causes the air to shake, because as the object shakes, the air leaning on it will shake. So an idiophone means self-sounding, means you hit the thing and the thing itself is what's shaking. All these are idiophones. Some of you made idiophones for your homemade instruments. Next type, membranophones, membrane sounding. So you have some sort of stretched membrane. A stretched membrane can be a drum, such as here a snare drum. You could also have a bigger drum like a timpani drum. So notice the skin on top. Here it's not actually skin, but it's pulled tight. Here are some bongos. And this even, no, she's not doing anything bad, that's a kazoo. As you blow air into a kazoo, there's actually a membrane in there that flaps back and forth. It gives it that funny buzzing sound. Now, some of you actually made membranophones for your homemade instrument. And so these actually are sometimes skin, pulled tight. But in this case, you hit that and that's what vibrates. That stretched skin is what vibrates. So could you say, oh, well, I'm still hitting the thing? Well, sure you are. But it tends to be a different sort of sound. You know, these have a pingy sound to them often, and these have more of a sort of pop to them. Anyway, some of you made these membranophones. All right. Next sort, chordophones. Chordo is Greek for string. So chordophones are string sounding. Here's some string sounding, a violin, a banjo, a harp, a guitar, although typically we talk about an acoustic guitar. There's an electric guitar here, but an acoustic guitar. So basically you got to get that string sounding. Here's also a string instrument. Maybe you didn't realize. Inside a piano, actually, each of these, you can see each of these little copper-colored buttons there. That's actually the end of a string. This is like a guitar with 88 strings, basically. So your guitar maybe would have 5 or 6. This one's got 88. So these are all strings going along here. So if you get air to vibrate by way of a vibrating string, we call it a chordophone. Finally here we have aerophones. Aero means wind or air. So aerophones get air to vibrate by vibrating air. So it's not quite so simple. If it were just, well, if I'm already vibrating the air, well, yeah, that would be talking and singing. You want to modulate it. You want to change it. So here you have to generally blow air into a saxophone or a trumpet or a tuba or a clarinet or a trombone. And it's not always the same method when you do so. And that will then cause the air around it, the air inside this barrel, the air inside the instrument to vibrate, and that's what travels to your ear. So notice here these four types, the Idiophones, the Membranophones, the Chordophones, and the Aerophones, basically all cause vibrating air to transmit from the end of the instrument to your head. However, or cause the energy, and then that transmits to your head. However, the method by which you get it to first vibrate is different. And so that's why we have this classification scheme. And we're going to compare that to music class, which is not exactly the same thing, but it sort of fits within it. By the way, there is one more that they have added, and that is Electrophones. May not consider this quite in the same class as the others, but this is electric sound. So that's something like an electric keyboard. It's a lot of modern music, a lot of EDM sort of music. So electrophones actually can fall into the classification as well, but not considered traditional music the way traditional instruments the way the other four have. All right, so let's go compare the others.